Well, I am so glad that so many of you could join us today. As people trickle in, I just want to give a couple of reminders about this call. Today's topic is back to spring, of course. We're all in back to spring this month, but we have a special guest, Eric Edmeades, here to talk to us about spring. So any of the questions that you have, I know that he's going to be able to answer all of those. So if you have any questions, just make sure to raise your hand and send them over. Just a reminder, of course, don't send them directly to Eric in the chat. If you do have any questions, post them either publicly in the chat or raise your electronic hand so that we can call on you. We'd love to hear you ask those questions. You are muted whenever you're here, but if you do need to speak, we'll unmute you or ask you to unmute depending on your Zoom settings. Again, keep those cameras on. We like to see your faces. And if you have any technical questions, just remember that you have that support@getwildfit.com email. So this is not the space for those, just send those into our customer service team. We are recording this, of course. If you can't be with us live, just remember that this will be up within 48 hours in the Facebook group. And as always, it's so good to see you guys. It looks like everybody's logging on here, so I'm going to turn it over to Eric.
Hello, am I here? Do I exist? Hello, everybody. Can I just get confirmation you can hear me? It sound good? All right, it's my first broadcast today, so I thought I'd check it out with you all. So today, we're gonna be talking about seasons. And so there's gonna be a recap. You've probably heard just about everything I'm about to say, but then I wanna dive in and kind of answer any questions you guys have about seasons and in particular spring. And the reason we're gonna talk about seasons is that, frankly, our ancestors didn't have to think about seasons. They didn't have to think about switching between them with willpower or with thought process or consciousness. Mother Nature did that for them. Mother Nature just came along and changed stuff, and then they had to respond to that. And of course, one of the problems that we have today is that we no longer have that issue, and yet our bodies still want it. Our bodies still want it. Let me explain kind of where part of this comes from. I've been working on a general theory of human happiness and satisfaction called the evolution gap. And the evolution gap speaks about the difference between the pace of change in our civilization and our technology and the pace of change in our genetic makeup. So for the vast majority of our evolution, we evolved in very tiny incremental steps, like a giant multi-millennium version of chess. Nature makes a change, we make a change, and it's all done through tiny incremental accidental mutations, and it takes forever. And so then all of a sudden, starting arguably about 2 million years ago, humans started, or pre-humans started figuring out things like fire and tools. And once they started doing that, it created a gap between the natural environment and us. And nature suffered as a result of this gap. I'll give you a great example. One of the very first animals to go into extinction that we know about was the giant tortoise. Now, it didn't go extinct everywhere, but it went extinct in Africa probably about 2 million years ago. Think about it. If you're a giant tortoise, if you've made it through your first 30 years, like when you're 30 years old, you're about this big and you can still be hunted to some degree. But by the time you've passed that mark, there's basically nothing that can hunt you. You are safe. Not a lion, not a hyena, you're safe. But all of a sudden, teenagers figure out that they can just poke holes through the leg holes and they can hunt you and then crack open all of a sudden it changes, right? Because we were able to use tools beyond our teeth. And so nature suffered as a result of the evolution gap, and it continues to. But what a lot of people don't understand is that we also suffer as a result of the evolution gap. Here's one example. How many of you have ever been actually terrified by a piece of paper? I mean it. You've received a bill or a summons or a nasty letter or a rejection letter, and it's caused all kinds of adrenaline, anger. How many have had that? Okay, it was a piece of paper. And I guarantee you, not one of your ancestors pre the last few generations could be frightened by a piece of paper. None of them. I mean, Maybe they would have. I can think of it now. We go back 100,000 years in a time machine and we show them a piece of paper. They might be freaked out by the idea of something white and perfect lines. But you understand what I'm kidding. They would not be frightened by a piece of paper. The trouble is that our nervous system and our adrenal system was evolved in response to regular daily threats. And so now we get this piece of paper and our full biochemistry kicks in and goes, oh my God, I might die because of this bill from American Express or Visa or whatever, right? And of course, that's not really going to happen. Now, there are other examples of where the evolution gap is punishing us. And one of them is this. Your pancreas. Guys, the pancreas is just the most amazing thing. I mean, it really is. It is a truly amazing organism, or organ, I should say. And here's what I mean by that is, as your body switches in response to the seasonal changes in a normal natural environment, your pancreas adjusts its job. It starts doing different things. And so in historically speaking, if you had suddenly you move to the fall season and you're eating lots of carbohydrates and you're eating, root vegetables and plentiful fruits, your pancreas knows what to do with that. It knows what to do with that. What does it need to do? Produce lots of insulin. It needs to produce lots of insulin, which is, by the way, a protein. So your body has to be you got to be healthy with proteins. And then your body makes all this insulin for you. And what does the body do at that point? Well, it says, I need energy. So it starts metabolizing your food like this. It says, all right, I need energy. All right, take some of that food and put it in the blood. It's like my wallet. I can carry it around with me. And you can carry about 2,000 calories of energy like that in your, just right there, ready to go. And just so you get a sense of what 2,000 calories are, it's like, it's kind of enough to live your day. It's just enough to kind of get you through the day. And a lot of times when you get through the first 1,700 or so calories, you start to get tired and it's difficult and life is challenging. And so then all of a sudden your body's going, well, you got to eat some more and bring some more in. But here's the other thing. Your pancreas is so smart. Your body is so smart. Once the blood sugar is full, it starts taking that sugar and putting it in your muscles and in your liver. And it's called glycogen. And it stores there, ready for a rainy day when your wallet is empty. When your blood sugar gets low, in theory, your body's going to go, I can just release some of the glycogen. Of course, heavy use of your muscles helps with that and so forth. But then, once the glycogen is full, and I think of that as kind of like your savings account, right? So the blood sugar is like your wallet, your purse, and then the muscles in your liver storing the glycogen, that's like your savings account. But once your savings account is full, the body, it's so smart. It says, well, let's take some of that energy and let's put it in the fat. And it starts storing that fat. And it's like, and the body's so smart about this. It says, where should we put it first? You know what? First place to put it, around the abdomen, because it'll act like a defense system for all the organs in there. It'll act like a layer of defense. And also it doesn't get in the way of our movement. Our body puts the fat on in the best way possible for survival in the wilderness. But then what happens? We go into winter and there's massive calorie restriction and water restriction. And so the body has lots of stored energy and stored water, but it doesn't know how long winter's going to last. So what does the body do? It ekes it out. It gives you the least amount that it can possible. And in fact, in some cases, it'll actually switch to protein burning. And we don't talk a lot about that, but it's so important because here's how smart your body is. When your body switches to protein burning, it seeks out the oldest and potentially diseased proteins and burns them first. Now, what do you think would happen if you didn't do that for several years in a row? Disease. Like it's called autophagy, and it's one of the most unbelievably miraculous functions of the body. Like it's incredible. And if you don't let your body do it, then what are you building up? A population of diseased and sick and old proteins. So it's great when your body does that. But then all of a sudden the rains start. And the rains come thundering down and the grasses start growing and the plants start growing and the animals are having babies. And all of a sudden the hunting is good again. And there's lots of plant around. And what are we eating? Largely new plants, greens, that sort of stuff. And even more, for those of us who aren't vegetarian and vegan, hunting season begins and we are eating animal products. We're eating meat and eggs and fish and all that kind of stuff. And the body, the pancreas, let's come back to the pancreas. Pancreas says, okay, got to switch up here. It's no longer about the, oh, hold on. Apparently I'm having a camera issue here. It's no longer about the metabolizing of the sugar. It's now about processing all the fat and protein that we're bringing in. And we're not bringing enough dietary sugar in. And so first you burn through your blood sugar. Then your body goes, okay, time to burn the glycogen. And then the body says, holy, we're really going to have to also burn this fat. And what a good thing that is, because we don't need it anymore. Because look, there's an abundance of food around. We don't need to store this anymore. I mean, honestly, if somebody's carrying 20 or 30 pounds of fat, how would you feel if you were carrying 30 pounds of snacks in your backpack and you got to the end of the hike and now there's food everywhere? Are you going to carry the backpack around anymore? No, you can put it down, and your body wants to put it down. So here's the thing. For millions of years, our body has gone through these cycles, and our organs have evolved in response, and our cleansing systems have evolved in response. Our lymphatic system has, like, everything has evolved in response to that. And yet the vast majority of people in the Western world are not following anything like seasons anywhere. Oh, some people go, well, I eat what's seasonally available at the farmer's market. Yeah, I understand. Most of that's genetically altered, and they farm it using practices that make it available year round. They farm it in greenhouses, so it's not actually following any natural seasonal pattern. The truth of the matter is, most people will never experience ketosis. Most people will never experience that incredibly important body function because they will not experience spring. Now, here's the thing though. Who would do that on purpose? Like, I mean, look, honestly, when there's mangoes around, you're eating them. And there was there's no part of your ancestors that was like, do you think we should take a break from mangoes now? Do you think we should? No way you would do that. They're yummy. Why would you take a break from them? There was no gene, there was no instinct, there was no evolution that got us to start using willpower to not eat that stuff. What made us not eat it anymore is that it wasn't there. It was gone. Maybe you complained about it a little bit, but you moved on. And so we live in a different world now where we actually have to use our consciousness to switch seasons. And if we don't, the pancreas will suffer. We have to be careful of anecdotal references that aren't properly scientific. But, I am going to tell you, and maybe you guys have heard me talk about this before, but I was really fascinated to see that Ashton Kutcher was going to play. He was playing Steve Jobs in a movie about Steve Jobs, and he wanted to do the method acting thing where he really got into the role. And Steve Jobs was fruitarian for a long time, and for a long time apparently only ate apples. And anyway, Ashton Kutcher decided to do that, and then one day he had to be rushed off the set of the movie in a medical emergency because his pancreas had given up. By the way, does anybody remember what Steve Jobs died of? Pancreatic cancer. Now, look, this is anecdotal. It's not scientific. I don't want to, say that this, means never, ever, ever eat fruit. Of course, I don't mean that at all. What I'm suggesting is that, isn't it possible that Steve Jobs lived in one season for too long? Isn't it possible that Ashton Kutcher came along and mimicked that behavior and ate in one season too long and messed up the same organ? That's why we have to make sure that we switch. That's why we have to make sure that we use our consciousness to switch the seasons from time to time. So how many of you are currently doing the back to spring program? How many of you are currently in that? Okay. So for those of you who are in, excellent. Well done. Keep going. And for those of you who didn't jump in this time around, I want you to know that the reason that we created that program for members is that we need reminders. We need reminders because Mother Nature isn't doing it for us anymore. And so we have to put our consciousness in and do it. And so I want to suggest to you that when we launch that for members, when we create the Back to Spring program for members, you should jump in at least every second time, if not every time. You really should. Your body needs you to do that. Your mouth won't want you to. Your taste buds won't want you to do it. You're especially, like, guys, I've often had to go into spring here at home in mango season. It's soul destroying. I mean, let me just tell you what mangoes are like here. I know a lot of you live in a place where the mangoes have to be flown in and, all that kind of stuff. Like, no. The mangoes here, they fall off the tree And I'm telling you, every now and again, I eat a mango and I eat that mango and I'm like, I'm almost depressed that I ate this mango because this mango was so good that I might never enjoy mangoes ever again. It was so good. Like, and so you can imagine that when I go into spring and mangoes on the trees, it's like you got to, there is willpower and consciousness that's involved in that. Luckily, we've gone through the process. We've gone through the process of understanding that. We just sometimes need the reminder. So I wanted to give you this background again about the seasons and the background again of the importance of spring. And then I want to jump in with you guys and I want to answer any questions you have. Now, this is in a sense an AMA. You can ask me anything, but really I'm most interested in supporting you guys in understanding the seasons and understanding spring and understanding how to navigate it and all that kind of stuff. So you can ask anything if it's really pressing, but the purpose of this call is to really dive into seasons and dive into spring. So who's up first? Kat, if you can handle prepping people, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Simi asked a question here in the chat. Simi, do you want to ask this out loud? Um, I'll ask it for you. How often should we go back into spring ideally? I don't need to lose weight and I'm healthy. Is it okay to do it only once a year?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. There's a number of ways that we can trigger ourselves to going back into spring. The truth is that I believe that the best season for us to live in, to have the highest quality sense of emotions and the most optimism and the greatest general health, is to be in a natural form of spring or early summer. And so, what does that mean? It means spring with, and here's the only measurement you'll ever really get from me on WildFit. We don't do calorie counting. We don't do food weighing and all that kind of stuff. But there is one measure that I'll give you. And that is that once you are adjusted to spring, I don't recommend this when you are first doing it. But if you've been in and out of spring a few times and your body seems to move through spring fairly well, then you can maintain being in that space with up to 25 grams of carbohydrates in a day. 25 grams. So that's kind of like, say, normal spring or early summer. And I think that's the best season to live on a regular basis. On a regular basis, that's the place to stay. Occasionally going to winter with some form of fasting, occasionally going into fall and binging out on some carbs for a few weeks at a time, sure, or a few days at a time. But for the most part, I believe that being in a natural spring, not deep spring, but a natural spring or early summer type place is the best place to live on a regular basis. So when you say, can I only do it once a year? Well, I would say, yeah, but then you should do it for most of the year. It's in that natural spring. Now, if you're asking about deep spring, I believe that deep spring is something that is there as a hack and it's designed to trigger weight release and it's designed to kind of shock the body. And for most of us, the reason we have to do it is that the majority of us have never gone into spring before WildFit. Most people have not. A few people have experimented with keto a little bit here and there, but most people have never gone in. And so it takes a bit of a shock and awe campaign to get the body to understand it's time to burn fat. And that's why we go into that deep spring space. But once you've kind of established a relationship with spring, then a natural, but bear in mind, when we talk about those 25 grams, what we are saying to you is those are not bad grams. We're not talking about 25 grams of Mars bar, right? 25 grams of, we're not talking refined sugar. We're talking, maybe some root vegetables or that sort of stuff, upwards of 25 grams of carbs that way. So, and then also just going back to the triggers, if somebody does have weight loss as a goal, then they'll want to go deeper into spring and do spring for longer. If somebody doesn't have weight loss as a goal, then they might want to do a softer version of spring or spend a little bit more time in summer. But just remember this, carbs stimulate the craving for carbs and nature wouldn't have provided them to us so heavily all the time. And so we just need to be a little bit careful of that. I'll say this, I believe that normal spring and like say normal natural spring and deep or an early summer are a really nice place to live the majority of the time. And just as a reminder, when we talk about deep spring, we're talking about basically no carbs, right? No measurable carbs. You're not eating any root vegetables, not even root vegetables. You're really focusing on greens and animal proteins as an ideal way of doing it if you're not vegetarian. In a natural spring, what we accept is that, guess what? Bees make honey in the spring. We would have found honey from time to time. And there is limited availability of root vegetables during that time. So we likely would have had some carbs from time to time. But also listen to this. This is really important. Sometimes people say this to me. They go, Eric, I'm 90% in spring. Okay. Do you mean that you're 90% in spring every day? Or do you mean that you're 90% of your in spring, like out of 10 days? So think about it. In 10 days, somebody could be 90% spring every day for 10 days, or somebody could be totally in spring for 9 days and then not in spring on the 10th day. And that would still be 90%. I want you to know that that's the way to do it. It's not to have a tiny little bit of carbs every day. That's what would be better is to have the, 1 day or 2 days in the week where you do allow a little bit of carbs. But ideally, you want days in a row where you are staying in ketosis. And for those of you who have like keto strips that you can test, that's one of the ways you can experiment with this. So you might be in spring, your keto strips show you have ketones. Don't worry about about those strips, please don't worry about their accuracy in terms of like how much in spring they say you are or how deep in ketosis you are. They're not that accurate. Honestly, if you drink a lot the day before, you're going to water down your urine and it's going to make it look like you don't have that many ketones. If there are ketones, you're in spring. That's it. Don't worry about how many, don't worry how dark the strip is. If there are ketones, you're in spring. Does that make sense? And so when you're in spring, what you can do is use those keto strips. And then you go, well, today I'm going to eat some carrots and I'm going to see if it knocks my body out of ketosis. And if it doesn't knock your body out of ketosis, guess what? You've really repaired your insulin resistance. Your body is operating really well, because upwards of 25 slow burning carbs like that should not knock you out of ketosis. But if they still do, then you want to make sure you're staying in a deeper version of spring and not having carbs so often. Great question.
Some Nidra, if you'll unmute.
Okay. Oh, I'm so excited that I can ask you this question, Eric.
Right.
I did the WildFit with Mind Valley April, very recently. I loved it. I never had an aspiration to lose weight. I'm very lean anyway.
Okay, I lost her. Did you guys lose her too? Okay, Nidra, are you there still? Kat, keep an eye on her. Oh. Nidra, maybe turn your camera off. You might have a bandwidth problem. Normally, I don't encourage people to turn the camera off, but you might need to in this case.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yep, I've got you.
Oh, shit. Can you? Okay, good. Okay, so my question is this. I lost a lot of weight when I did, I went into deep spring. I felt great. I went down to 100 pounds. I'm 5'6". And I'm a physical person anyway. I've never put the weight back on. And was a little bit nervous to go into deep spring again, because I'm not sure if this is good for me or not. And the deeper motivation was, I have a lot of still have inflammation in my body. I've been told I have osteoarthritis in my hips, and I need a hip replacement. And I'm a yoga and a Pilates teacher, and I'm like, something about this. I'd like to repair my body the best way I can with food. And so, how do I navigate this?
Okay,
because I understand that.
So I feel like there's two important questions in there. One has to do with, like, if I go in spring, will I lose too much weight? Now, remember that weight is kind of an absolute thing. Like, you weigh a certain amount, but you can weigh a certain amount and be really healthy, and you can weigh that same amount and be unhealthy. Does everybody understand me about this? So, for example, when I first discovered, healing myself with food, I weighed about 175 pounds, 180 pounds, and I was chubby and unhealthy and what have you. I then lost 30 some odd pounds, and I got down to about 150, 55 pounds, and I looked incredibly thin, way too thin, but way, way healthier. And most people wouldn't have said I looked too thin. I just look at it myself now that way. But then over the space of the next year, I put 30 some odd pounds back on. And today I actually am 10 pounds heavier than I was then. I weigh about 180 85 pounds, and my scale this morning tells me I'm at 14% body fat. Back then, I would have been 25% body fat, right? So I weigh more now than I did then, but anybody would tell you I'm smaller or I don't look overweight, right? So that's an important distinction. And so when you think about the way your body puts weight on, the biggest influences to your weight are fat, muscle. Biggest changeable influences to your weight are fat, muscle, and water, right? Like, so if somebody's dehydrated and then they suddenly drink and they take in an extra half liter of water, that's a pound. They just gained a pound, like just because they've got more water in them. Now, when you go into spring, what your body will do in that spring season is it moves toward metabolizing fat, and it will ultimately burn fat away. But if you've now burned enough of the fat away that you're like, I don't want to burn any more fat away, remember that your body also in that season really likes to build muscle. But the only trouble is that building muscle actually requires effort. The thing with fat is it doesn't. Like, your body just goes, oh, I'm eating sugar, I can put on some fat now. And conversely, you go out and eat phenomenal amounts of protein, and your body goes, wow, we could totally burn some muscle right now, but there's no need, because we're not doing anything. And so the way I like to communicate this is that every day you give yourself 3 messages. One of 3 messages. You give your muscles one of 3 messages. The one message is, I don't need you. I don't need you. The next message is, I love you and I care about you. And the third message is, you're not enough and you got to grow. And those are the 3 messages that you send your muscles on any given day. How do you do that? On day 1, you have a very sedentary day. You don't do anything. You never stress your muscles. You don't really use them. And your muscles get the message they're not needed. So what do? They start to fade away because you don't need them. So why have this extra tissue? Why carry this extra weight? I don't need it. It goes away. And then on another day, you might use your muscles just enough to let them know you love them. Not enough to make yourself sore the next day, but just enough, they get fired up and what have you. And then on that day, the body goes, well, all right, I guess we can keep some of the muscle here. I guess we're okay. And then on the third type of day, it's when you actually do something with your muscles that's beyond their capacity. In other words, I'm so sorry to put it this way, but if you want to gain positive weight, you have to damage your muscle self-esteem. You gotta make your muscles feel small. And how do you do that? I just came from the gym and I fried my chest, and I can tell you even now it's a little painful, right? And I can imagine what it's going to be like tomorrow. So basically, how is my chest feeling right now? It's feeling like, I'm not enough. Eric wanted to do more than I could. I need to grow. And so now the muscles will grow as long as I put in appropriate levels of protein and water, because you can't grow muscles without water, right? Okay, so in terms of the weight gain and loss, remember, it's not just the food at this point, it's also the type of physical routine that you have. So if you want to be in spring and you're concerned about losing weight, well, one of the things you do to not lose that weight is to make sure you're maintaining good muscle density, that you're doing stuff particularly with your legs, but also your upper body, so that you have that. So that's one answer for you on ultimately your body will not ever want you to lose weight to an unhealthy level. It just won't want to do that. And the way we get our body to a natural good weight level is we eat in seasons, we eat well, but we also use the body. And that's a big part of it. Now, the second part, you were talking about inflammation. And so I'm going to discuss something with you guys that's a little, controversial for some people. And for those of you who are currently practicing vegetarians or vegans, I apologize for the message that's coming now about this, but I want to talk to you a little bit about inflammation and autoimmune disease and that kind of stuff. So, all right, let's say this. By the way, Jeff, 100 pounds. Honestly, we should have a special award for that. We can't make a note. There should be some special t-shirt you get for that 100 pounds. I mean, honestly, there should be, it's like you can go to Fatty Arbuckle's and you go, I ate the big meal and I got this t-shirt. Well, we should have the opposite one. It's like,
well, the crazy thing is no one even noticed that I lost weight because I'm lean and muscular, and I'm restricted by my hip pain and the fact that if I work my legs too much, I feel like I'm breaking down my joints. But anyhow, yes.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about like I say, autoimmune disease and inflammation and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
All right. So you guys are aware that as plants go, I'm a bigger fan of older world plants and not that big a fan of newer world plants. Now, for those of you who need a little explanation, what does that mean? What it means is that humans, like, here's a controversial thing for you. In the United States right now, there's a bunch of states that are now practicing Indigenous Day rather than Columbus Day. And I understand the sentiment behind that, except for one problem. Indigenous means naturally occurring there, and humans are not indigenous to North America. We're not indigenous to there. We're indigenous to Africa. And it's a funny thing about English because, you know, where do we draw the line on what indigenous is? But the reason I mention this is that humans did the vast majority of our evolution on the African continent. And then we kind of did some topping up as we moved out of Africa around the world. And one of the challenges that we have is that the evolutionary process is very, very, very slow. It has taken about 5 million years to turn us from tree-dwelling apes to upright savanna animals that can walk on hind legs and live the way we live. And by the way, that same 5 million year window likely created the white rhino, because it's kind of a interesting little evolutionary thing. But about 5 million years ago, Africa was jungle from Cape Town to Cairo, we believe. And so if you look at animal distribution maps today, it's really interesting. You'll see animals that live in Ethiopia and in South Africa, but there's no possible way for them to connect with each other. Like, they can't cross the Sahara. They can't cross well, because it used to be jungle the whole way, and they used to be able to commute around the place. And then as Africa started to dry up and big savannas opened up and big deserts opened up, people got forced into living into smaller spaces. And some people were forced to try to figure out how to live in the grasslands. And our ancestors were one of those animals that tried to figure out how to live in the grasslands. So was the white rhino. And it's taken 5 million years for the white rhino to become a grass eater and change its entire, 5 million years. I don't know if you can relate to how many years that is, but it's like a lot of years. And so for us, we only really, like, Sapiens is only about 300,000 years old, and humans only got to North America maybe 50 to 30,000 years ago, in that gap. And most of us don't even have any of their DNA. Most of us, as I'm looking here, are either from Asian DNA or European DNA. Very rare for us to be from native North American or native South American DNA. Why do I say this? Because that means for most of us, the first time we ate a nightshade plant in our genetic history is only about 400 years ago. The first time any of you ate an eggplant was 400 years ago in your DNA. And by the way, you probably didn't, incidentally. I just want to be clear about that. You probably didn't. The first time you could have was 400 years ago. But the truth is, many of you, eggplant entered in last generation or this generation. You're talking, there are some of you who are eating plants now that your parents didn't eat, that your grandparents certainly didn't eat, and that your great-grandparents certainly didn't eat. And so what does that mean from an evolutionary perspective? Okay. This is a little, are you guys up for complicated? Are we okay with a little complicated today? All right. So my father is maybe one of the best minds in the world about human history and human migratory patterns and all this kind of stuff. And he's been interested in that stuff since he was a little boy. And we're just working on publishing a book of his, which some of you may have read, Sapiens, which his book is quite similar to the idea of Sapiens, but its focus is more on human migration and hunting patterns and extinction patterns. And so my dad one day said, well, Eric, look, WildFit's all cool and stuff, but why do you tell people to avoid New World plants, but it's okay for them to eat New World animals? Damn, it's a good question, isn't it? It's a good question. Like, why is that? And immediately I'm like, damn it, that's a good question. I got to figure out why that is. And then it came to me. And I may have, when I answered this question, been the very first person on earth to point out that plants defend themselves. Now it's a thing. People out there talking about lectins and that kind of stuff, but let's talk about it. Here's why. Animals largely defend themselves with their size, their speed, their strength, camouflage, teeth, and claws, right? That's how they defend themselves. It's rare for an animal to defend itself biochemically. There are some that can. The skunk defends itself biochemically. It doesn't use biochemistry in its meat, but it still uses biochemistry. And there's an antelope in Africa called the water buck, and it also uses biochemical defenses. It produces an oil in its skin that crocodiles don't like. So when a lion is chasing it, it just runs into the water. No other antelope can do that because of the crocodiles, right? So, but mostly animals use speed, strength, claws, hooves, teeth, horns, that kind of stuff, right? How do plants defend themselves? Because every organism's defending itself. Don't mistake that. They're all defending themselves all the time. So how do plants defend themselves? Well, like animals, they do use some physical defenses, like thorns. You know, thorns are a physical defense. But the way they really defend themselves mostly is through biochemistry. And because they can't run away, what they have to do is find ways to dissuade us from eating them and to make themselves undigestible, or to even harm us so that we won't eat them. And they've been doing this for a long, long time. You guys might not know, but you know, the giraffe does not have a long neck. It didn't evolve the long neck to get to the branches at the top. That's not why it got the long neck. The reason the giraffe evolved its long neck is that plants were evolving a defense mechanism called tannin. And so acacia trees, when you start nibbling at them, they start pushing tannin out into the leaves, which makes the leaves incredibly bitter and hard to digest and difficult. You don't want them anymore. And worse than that, the damn plants communicate. They have the plant internet. And so they use like some sort of pheromones to communicate with each other. And so when this acacia tree starts producing tannins, so does the one beside it. So any antelopes that are in a herd together are like, well, I can't eat the one next to you. Now I have to go further away. And if I can't see you, we're not safe anymore. So some animals evolved the ability to process the tannins, and other animals evolved really long necks so they could spread the herd out so everybody could have a fresh treat. It's incredible. I mean, nature is incredible. And so, and by the way, another defense mechanism that the acacia trees have is every single species of acacia tree has its own species of ant that lives on the tree. Species alignment. And why does it live on the tree? Because the minute an animal starts coming along and nibbling at the leaves, what does the ant do? Attacks the animal. It's attacking its home. So plants are defending themselves, make no mistake. The challenge is that there are some plants that we've been eating for a long time, and so we've overcome the defense mechanisms, or we can overcome the defense mechanisms, say, like physically. So, for example, a macadamia nut does not need biochemistry. It is simply the shell. In case any of you have ever tried to open one, you can't. You need a machine to open a macadamia nut. I mean, it's a really hard thing to open. And so it doesn't need a biochemical defense because it's got a tough physical defense. Now, when we suddenly moved off and started eating South American plants, we encountered, particularly the nightshades, we encountered a bunch of stuff that looked edible, but it was constantly defending itself with lectins and enzyme blockers and hormone triggers that are designed to mess up your digestion and designed to cause problems. And so I want to put to you that a huge amount of what we currently consider to be autoimmune disease, the reason we call it autoimmune disease is because the immune system is attacking the body, right? Well, yeah, but it's only attacking the body insofar as there are things in the body that aren't supposed to be there. And so the immune system's attacking the parts of the body that has that thing. It's kind of like, you know, if the Germans in World War II had made it to Brighton, then Britain would have bombed Brighton. Like, it's an autoimmune disease. We got to get rid of this thing that's invading. We're going to bomb our own place to get rid of them, right? And so the body's kind of going, wow, you've got these lectins. It's made it through your leaky gut. It's made it through your intestinal system. And now it's getting out into your bloodstream. And so we're going to go attack it. And we're going to have pain and inflammation. So, long answer here to a short question. What I want to suggest to you is this, is first of all, I want you to really think about the plants that you're eating and really truly try to tone out any New World plants like tomatoes. If you're having inflammation issues, tomatoes, eggplants, that like potatoes, out. They in my opinion, they're going to cause an increase in inflammation and autoimmune disease. And now I'm going to say something even less popular than this. Human beings are entirely capable of surviving on meat alone for several generations in a row. Human beings cannot survive on vegetables alone for several generations in a row. They can't do it. They never have. There's never been a case in history where they have, but there are many cases in history where humans have had to survive on vegetables alone. When humans crossed the Bering Strait to come into America for the first time, they were living in ice fields for multiple generations where there were no vegetables. They were eating only meat during that time. There's not a single nutrient that humans need, not one nutrient that humans need that isn't available in animal products. Not one, not one of the 13 vitamins, not one of the 16 minerals, none of the amino acids. There is nothing that a human being requires that isn't actually available in animal products. Now, we can get into the whole vegetarian, vegan, like ethics conversation about this, but right now I'm talking about plants are defending themselves. And so I recently was consulting with a relative of mine about inflammation. And my recommendation was to actually not eat plants for a while, to go 10 days without eating plants. Eat fish, eat meat, eat organ meats, eat eggs, but don't eat any plants for a while. And this is the deepest version of spring that you can go. And incidentally, and we don't have this inside the WildFit challenge because at the time that we were designing it, we were aware of this stuff, but we really wanted to see more science on it. I will tell you that in the next version of WildFit, there will be an option to go through spring this way, because for many people, it's incredibly advantageous, particularly if their body and immune system is already triggered. So what I would suggest to you in that case is you might want to try, say, 10 days where you're actually not taking any plant materials in at all. But listen, this is the tough part of this, is that when I say that there's not a single nutrient, like how about vitamin C? Where does vitamin C come from? Does anybody know? I know we know oranges and grapefruits and stuff, but do you know that even a better source for vitamin C than that is liver? It's an incredibly good source of vitamin C. The problem is that liver is disgusting as far as I'm concerned. Like, I hate this stuff. Like I'll tell you guys a funny little childhood story here. When I was about 5 years old, I went to this like sort of daycare preschool thing, you know, and while my parents were working and whatever. And at lunchtime, they would serve us liver on Tuesdays. It was the deal. Every Tuesday there was liver. And I hated liver so much. At 5 years old, 6 years old, I riled up all the other students and I created a hunger strike, and I got everybody else to refuse to eat. And no kidding, I changed the school policy that they stopped serving liver. That's how much I hate liver. Except one of the things I've come to terms with is that, look, many of us, if we went hunting, we might not, but say we had to hunt for survival, we'd get ourselves a deer and we had our dogs with us. What would we do? We throw the dogs, the liver, the heart, all, you eat that dog. Do you know what the Bushmen never throw to the dog? The liver, the heart. No way would they give that to the dog. It is the most valued part of the animal. And so if you're going to go on a period of like sort of a, say, carnivore spring, then what I would suggest during that time is you also have to intake, you really should take a look at taking in organ meats. And I can tell you that the way I do that, it's, I make this, it's almost world famous now, my chicken soup. I perfected it during the lockdown. But when I make my chicken soup, one of the things that I do is I take a bunch of livers and hearts and I blend them and add them to the broth. Rather than, I can't eat the liver, the texture just kills me. But in the broth, it's unbelievably there. I don't even taste it. It adds a nice umami flavor, in fact, but you don't have to deal with the texture. And then you're getting a super load of nutrition. So if you're worried about inflammation, if you're worried about inflammation and autoimmune type stuff, I would suggest doing a 10-day vegan, a 10-day veggie fast where you don't eat veggies at all during that, or fruit or any plant stuff during that time. You weren't expecting that answer, were you? Did I lose you?
Barbara, if you'll unmute.
Good morning.
Hello,
Good day.
Good day.
Everybody's everywhere. Nice to see you. I just think that Lynn's question is super important, and I wanted to have that answered. She asked, it seemed odd that eating fat can help you shed fat. And Eric, you have told us a million times, and I think I can maybe quote it verbatim, I'm not sure, but my understanding is that in the old fat is where we store toxins and some other stuff. And we need to be able to cycle that off and cycle fat on, because that's the way the body was designed. And that if you don't take in new fat, good fats, your body thinks that winter's coming and will store all the old fat. You have to give it new fat in order for the body to go, oh, we're safe, it's cool, we can release this old crap stuff. And so I think that's the simple version, but I don't know that Lynn had gotten to hear that. So I thought it was important that she knows.
Yeah, and listen, we can go a little further into that as well. You know, we humans are pattern spotters. We like spotting patterns, and it's our ability to spot patterns that's allowed us to grow these incredible civilizations. Like, again, I'll tell you a cute, funny story. The Hadza Bushmen quite enjoy smoking marijuana. It's a thing. They enjoy it. It's like one of their little, and it grows naturally in the area, but they don't know how to grow it. And in February, when I was with them, I got up to their camp, and I'm not kidding you. There's this little like 3-foot marijuana plant growing there. And I'm like, how did you, I asked the chief, what's going on? He goes, we don't know, man, but we just protect it. We don't know what happened, but we just protect it. They don't realize that what happened was when they're rolling it, they throw the seeds or whatever, and they grew it. They don't know that they did that. They haven't connected the fact that they can grow stuff. But at some point in time, our ancestors did figure that kind of stuff out. And look, if we throw seeds here, plants grow. So pattern spotting has been really, really important to us. But pattern spotting can also really hold us back. In fact, a huge amount of why we're so superstitious is pattern spotting. One of my silly examples is if we have a young baseball player, he's a rookie, it's his first year, he's probably going to sit on the bench during the World Series, but then something happens and he gets put in the lineup, and he gets up to bat and he cracks one out and wins the game. Okay. Now what's going to happen at that point is his mind, this is a gorgeous app that humans have, but his mind is going to replay the 24 hours before this incredible victory and ask him how he created it. Your mind, anytime you have an incredible victory, your mind replays the last 24 hours and says, what did I do? How did I do this? I need to do it again. And so he's going to remember that back in the locker room, he was putting on his shoe. He put his left shoe on first. He put his right shoe on second. And then he got up and banged his head on the locker. And it hurt. And for the rest of his career as a baseball player, he's going to put his left shoe on first and his right shoe on second. And then he's going to bang his locker. He's going to bang his head on the locker. Why? For good luck. Because he pattern spotted, right? You see what, you know, and so we do that. We pattern spot. Sometimes it's very functional, but then sometimes it's incredibly dysfunctional. And so I remember Tony Robbins. I saw Tony Robbins doing this talk some years ago, and he's talking about, he was giving a presentation, and it was in an old castle, and there was a suit of shining armor on the stage. And every time he walked down the stage doing his Tony Robbins thing, going up and down the stage, every time he walked near the armor, the microphone got static. And after about the third time this happens, the audience going, "It's the night! Stay away from the night! It's the night that's causing the," and they're shouting up, and he's like, wow, you guys are quick to create a pattern association. That's pretty quick of you. He goes, let's test your theory. And he's talking, and he walks over to the night, and sure enough, happens again, walks away, everything's fine. And then all of a sudden the static comes and he's not near the night. So he walks over to the night, static goes away. And only later did they realize what was going on is there was an emergency nearby, and ambulances and police had come through, and they were operating on a similar band, and they were causing it. And just because it happened coincidentally with the night, they created this pattern assessment. So we are humans love to look for patterns because they're life-saving, but they also hold us back. And here's one of them. If you eat fat, you'll get fat. It seems to make sense, doesn't it? I mean, it makes sense. I put fat in and it puts the fat on me. But if you actually understand what's going on inside the body, it doesn't work that way. Because when you eat fat, your body gets the message. There's plenty of calories out here in the world to burn. I don't need to store any. There's lots available. When you eat sugar, your body gets this other message. It's like, uh-oh, because the body knows sugar's rare and it's seasonal and it's coming to an end. And the body goes, man, I have to metabolize this into fat. I have to store all this energy right now. And so it's exactly the opposite of the way we've been taught about this. And then on top of that, just to add insult to injury, Barbara, the sugar industry did this to us. They taught us that fat does this. They taught us.
I tell everybody this.
Yeah. And so that's why we walk around with this whole idea. So it's really important to understand fat is incredibly important. And in fact, I'll tell you something else that's coming out heavily in the science right now. Cholesterol. Lowering your cholesterol is just as dangerous as letting it get too high. There's a sweet spot, and people now have been pushing their cholesterol down and taking drugs to push it down even further. And it's now showing that that low cholesterol is lethal. But again, this was the science that was bought by the sugar industry. So please know that fat is healthy for you if it's the right kind of fat. And what's the right kind of fat? Naturally occurring fats are best. So obviously most of the animal fats that we get when we eat fatty fishes and that kind of stuff, they're fine. They're absolutely good, especially if the animal was raised well, was ethically treated, was not full of adrenaline through its lifetime. Those things are important. And then the other kinds of fats that can be good for us are, like say, coconut oil and olive oil and avocado oil and those types of things. And ultimately, the fats we want to stay away from are the highly processed, manufactured, garbage plastic fats like margarine, and of course, most of the seed oils as well. You want to stay away from those. So when people say, is fat good or bad? The answer is yes, fat is good or bad. But the good fats are not only are they good, but they're necessary. And we've been conditioned to cut them. No. So Barbara, great. Thank you for highlighting that super important message.
So here's my real question, because we're here to discuss cycling. I understand and have been reading over the months about, trying to determine your own cycle and depending upon whether you're category 1, 2, or 3. I watched the other video, etc. I seem to have a challenge getting a handle on how to plan and prep for my targeted seasons. And I don't know if everybody goes through this, because there's lots of different ways to do the count, and I understand that, depending upon what you're trying to accomplish. But somehow I can't wrap my head around how to plan and shop and prep to make a season work. And I personally need to cycle in and out of spring because I still have more health to gain and weight to lose, and everybody's in a different place. So I don't know if there's any kind of overall guidelines for how to kind of wrap our heads around that process.
This is one of the difficulties with not living in Mother Nature where it's guided for us. In fact, one of the things that I like about living where I live here in the Dominican Republic is I talk about mango season, but it really is a season. We don't fly mangoes in here. So the mangoes are here for a few weeks and then they're gone. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to use willpower. They're just gone. It's just, I'm sad, but they're gone. And so, yes, of course, we live in a world where we now have to take a lot more action to, a lot more consciousness to figure that out. I generally suggest to people that there are two ways. To figure out their schedule. The one is to use ratios, like we've talked about. So you just make a determination. You figure out a pattern that works for you. So you take a look and say, well, I want to do spring for say 3 weeks, and I want to do summer for a week, and then I want to go back into spring. And you just live that schedule. You put it in your Google Calendar or whatever. You live it. You shop according to it, and so on. And then the other way to determine your trigger is for especially for people who are category 1 and you don't particularly have a lot of weight that you want to lose or what have you, is that the way you would trigger it is that if you notice that your weight had come up a little bit, then you might go, oh, I've hit my threshold of how far I want my weight to come up, and I'm going back into spring. And I'll tell you, I'm there right now, like right now. So I am in the best shape that I've been, no kidding, in my entire life today at 50 years old. I am. And a big part of that is I've been good about food for a decade more, but I really undertook exercise as a big project this last year, and I've gotten in the best shape ever. But I also do seasons. So I did a very hardcore working out and carnivore spring, part of my research and testing and stuff like that. So I did 3 weeks of carnivore spring. And when I went into that really deep spring, I trimmed down. I have like proper 6-pack. I've never really had a 6-pack. I've never been that guy. It's never been, but I mean, there it was. I really, and then I came out of spring. Mangoes are in season here and what have you. And so I've been more flexible about that. I've been in a really good summer. Doesn't mean I'm eating ice cream and shit, of course, you guys understand, but it just means that, and you know what? I'm 6 pounds up in 2 weeks. I'm 6 pounds up in 2 weeks. That's my threshold, because I know that 6 pounds is not muscle. I'd be okay if I gained 6 pounds of muscle, but you don't gain 6 pounds of muscle in 3 weeks. Like that, you know what I'm saying here? I know that it's fat. And so what that means to me is I'm already now planning my next trip back into spring. Now, as it turns out, I'm about to leave. I'm leaving for Estonia tomorrow, and I'm going to be in Estonia for 3 weeks. I'm recording a new program, not WildFit related. I'm recording a business. For those of you who are Mind Valley members, it's a business, it's an entrepreneurship program. It's a business freedom quest I'm recording. And then I'm teaching a live workshop called the Quantum Shift Experience for several hundred people in Tallinn, which is going to be awfully weird to teach a live event in front of people again. You guys remember people? The actual people. And so, so I will do a little bit of alternating in and out of spring while I'm there. But then when I come home, I've already ordered it. I've already ordered that when I come home, there's going to be fresh fruit in the house the first day. I'm going to go through a little bit of a fresh fruit cleanse after all the travel. And then I'm going to go back into deep spring. And I've done that based on, I know where my body is at. I know how I feel. And that's how I'm determining the schedule. So either create a schedule that you're willing to stick to, or create a trigger that you're willing to work with. And if you're in the weight loss journey still, then the trigger one isn't really the best way to do it. The best way to do it is to have a ratio that you're living with. Now, the one thing that really helps with this is to have a tribe that does it with you. And so some of you have the ability, because you've got WildFitter friends around you, you can go to your WildFitter friends locally and say, let's go into spring together. And that's ideal. If you can do that, it's awesome. But of course, you've got the Living WildFit membership, and you don't have to wait for us to do back to spring. You don't have to do that. I mean, we do it because we want to give you the support and add value to you as members. But any one of you, and I've seen you do it. I've seen members do it. You can go in there and go, I would like to go into spring. I'm looking for 5 people to come with me. And then you're going to find, how many of you, if you saw somebody posting for spring and you're thinking, maybe I could do, how many of you might be up for joining a little mini group like that, right? So next thing you know, you join with Barbara, you guys create your own little Facebook group, or you create your own little Zoom channel, and off you guys go and you do spring together. And Barbara, I'm telling you, you know this, and I'm just saying it again. When you do it together, you go far. When you have a tribe, you don't have to use willpower so much, because you're checking in and there's accountability and so on. So I hope this gives you some answers and strategies.
Thank you.
Barbara, let me ask you something else. What is your net weight change from before WildFit to today?
27 pounds.
27 pounds. That's awesome. And by the way, how long ago did you do WildFit?
The August Mind Valley Quest last year.
Last
2019.
year. So by the way, have you previously ever, and there's a reason I'm going here and I'll explain in a minute. Have you previously ever done a diet that lost you 27 pounds?
I have.
And what was the story a year later?
It took a little bit. It was paleo. I didn't know it was paleo at the time. It was just a plan that was recommended to me, and it worked. And I was exercising at the same time, not heavily, and it worked. And I almost forget that now, but you know about. I've already talked about the flab, but I did lose a bunch of weight, and I felt really, really good, and I felt really, really healthy, and I didn't feel like it was cheating when I ate other stuff. But then I didn't have a framework for continuing.
No
So
seasonal
yes,
framework.
indeed, even though I felt very healthy, I put it back on, and I only put it on a little at a time. It took me a little bit to put it back, not as fast as usual, but I did. And so when I went through the first round of WildFit, maybe after some follow-up with the Living WildFit group, I realized, oh, it's not a life plan. Now, you've said this thousands and thousands of times, and so I'm able to quote this to people all the time, but yeah, a life plan is a whole different thing. So last year during the quest, I lost 15 pounds, 20 inches, because I taught people the importance of the other stuff besides the pounds. I thought 20 inches was a lot. Kept most of the 15 pounds off, put on just a couple of them. I did back to spring in the spring this year, I think. There was a spring this year, BC, I call it, before COVID, but that wasn't before COVID. Actually, spring was during COVID. But anyway, so I only put on a couple of pounds, and that is the story that I tell, that I maintained everything but a couple of pounds, and I had no trouble taking those couple of pounds off. And then I said, okay, now I'd like to take some more off. Yeah. So this year, with a combination of Facebook groups and that back to spring and doing your special, the first special challenge that you did, forgot what month it was that we did that. I did take off another 10 or whatever it was, 12. And so now I'm maintaining that. So now I just need to take off the rest and then figure out how to get unflabby. And in the meantime, a lot of people have been very impressed. And so I'm trying to lead by example. And as I posted in there, yeah.
Let me ask you one follow-up question.
Eric says all the time, yes.
Right now, what are the odds that you ever put that 27 pounds back on?
Way small.
Way small.
Way small, because I won't allow it.
Exactly. And you have a framework. So it's really important. And I think one of the things that happens sometimes is people go through a big recovery, and then the pain of the past starts to fade away a little bit. And so that's why I asked that question, is just to remind, like, you've done something phenomenal here, and you're asking exactly the right questions to move forward with it. And I think you're handling it the right way. Creating ratios for yourself, creating a trigger for yourself. For example, if you take off 17 and you find yourself put 3 back on, you're like, maybe it's time to go back to spring again. And that is there's nothing wrong with putting on an extra couple of pounds. It's healthy. Just, you got to cycle it back off again. And so I think you're running the game very, very well, and congratulations.
Thank you. And the biggest thing was learning that it's not a diet. And I won't even let people use that word.
Good deal. Barbara, thanks
So
very
thank
much.
you.
You're welcome.
Well, guys, I know that we have a couple more questions. I've been logging them. I know that keep in mind we have that weekly questions document that Ariel pulls from for the Facebook Lives. So I'm going to go ahead and put those that have been in the chat in there. And just remember that you can always post them there as well. That's in Unit 1.
Kat, I'm happy to go a little over time. It's okay.
Oh.
Take a few more.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think Lisa was next.
Hello, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Eric. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
So I have 3 questions. The first one is related to cycling. So I would like to know what is better, for the pancreas, just to be in most of the time in mild spring or early summer, or go to a spring, deep spring, a few times a year.
I actually think that what the pancreas would prefer is to do it the way our ancestors did. And our ancestors lived, their baseline existence would have been ketosis most of the time, with the occasional trip out. And they had 2 types of trips out of a spring that I can see. The one is that every now and again they would stumble upon honey, and they would binge on honey that day, but then it would be gone. So they would occasionally have like a day where they broke out, and then fall would come along and they'd have a few weeks where they broke out. But generally speaking, they were in most of the time, and they were in a form of spring the majority of the time. And so the pancreas is kind of like, in normal mode, it's producing glucagon, and occasionally it's supposed to produce insulin. And of course, in our world, it is almost always producing insulin, and it's rare that anybody ever produces glucagon because they have sugar every single day. So we have it not only opposite, but we have it opposite to the extreme. Great question, Lisa. Question number 2.
Yeah, the second one is about exercising. So usually I do intense hot yoga and sometimes cardio. So do you think that I can still do the hot yoga during the spring season?
Absolutely. Listen, first thing is, Lisa, I can't see all of you, but I'm looking at you. I don't think weight loss is like a massive issue to you. Okay. I'm just looking at you. And so one of the reasons that we discourage intensive exercise during the original 90-day program, there's 2 reasons we do it. The one is, WildFit is built on a very important principle that comes out of something I teach called behavioral change dynamics. And that is minimum opportunities to fail. So the more things we give you to fail at, the more likely you fail the whole program. So we don't want people pushing themselves and doing all this exercise. We just don't want that. And then equally, the second reason is that particularly for women, intensive exercise can actually raise cortisol levels and make it harder to lose weight. And so we're like, no, it's not. We don't think that that's ideal for most people. But once you've gone through the process once and your body has become, in a sense, fat adapted, you have a lot more flexibility about doing that sort of thing. So if you want to be doing hot yoga during spring, I have no problem at all. For any of the rest of you, if weight loss is a major goal of yours, then I'm not sure that would be the best strategy for you, but I'd be willing to try it. Because the one thing about hot yoga is it's balanced between being incredibly intense, but also very soothing for the mind and very hot for the body, which is great for metabolizing fat. So I'm a big fan of hot yoga.
Okay, thank you. And the last one is, I'm feeling like I have a little bit of confidence issues. I'm gonna tell you why. Because for example, I can be in mild spring or even early summer, and I
Lisa,
see...
bear with me 1 second. Bear with me 1 second.
Yeah.
Hello? Hello? Yes? Yes, how can I help you?
While Eric's taking this call, guys, I just want to go ahead and remind you all that the next check-in call is October the 28th at 6 p.m. And so just keep that in mind. It is that later date and it's actually in 2 weeks. So it's a little bit of a change. And of course, again, reminder just to fill out that weekly questionnaire form, and we'll have our next Back to Spring Facebook Live this coming Friday. So I'm looking forward to seeing you all there too. I just wanted to make sure to give that reminder. Yes, that's 6 p.m. New York time, correct. Sorry about that.
I agreed to go a little long here, and then I realized I had told somebody they could call me. It's a long story, but I'm back. Okay, Lisa, your next question.
It's okay, thank you. So it's basically that I'm in a season that I shouldn't be having fruits. I'm from Cuba, so for me it's pretty hard to avoid fruits. So, and I see like the same as you see mangoes or pineapples or bananas, and it's really hard for me being in the spring and not having fruits, because I just say to myself that fruits are good. So how can I work with that?
Well, I think that fruits are good, but they're good eaten properly, and they're good not overeaten. And it's really important to remember that. Like, water is good, but you can drown in it. Oxygen is good, but if there's too much oxygen in the room, that's a problem. And so there's many things that are good. Like kale is good, but if you eat too much of it, that's not good. So there's many things that are good, but they cross over and they become bad. And fruit is one of those things. And so before we Lisa, something you need to know. These fruit that you're eating now, they're basically frankenfruit. They're not real. That's not what fruit looked like when even some of you might be approaching, sort of my age or even a little older. How big was a strawberry when you were a little boy or a little girl? How big was a strawberry back then, right? They were like that big. How big are they now? They're like a small apple, and an apple's like a watermelon. Like, what's going on? We are using unnatural selection to breed fruit to be higher and higher and higher in sugar content. And so mangoes and bananas and pineapples and stuff, like, Lisa, I'm sure you've eaten plantains. They're not so sweet, are they? That's a much more natural banana, right? Like, that's not nearly so sweet. And so what I'm going to ask you to remember is that the fruit that you eat today is about 1,000 times more full of sugar than the fruit that your ancestors were eating. And so what that means is you want to eat it even less than they did. And they ate it for a couple of weeks when it came out. So know that your pancreas can handle it if you binge on fruit for a day or two or three or a week in a row, but there's going to come a point where it's too much. And so that's why we make the decision to go into spring. And I'm with you. You're in Cuba. You're just next door. I mean, I'm not far from you at all. And the same thing happens. We have the pineapples happening over here and the mangoes happening over here. And you know what? I just have to say no. It's right now, no. And guys, this is the whole thing. Like, WildFit is about helping you get to a place where you don't have to use willpower on a day-by-day basis to avoid junk foods and processed foods, that kind of stuff. But we still have to use consciousness to choose our seasons, and consciousness to choose our season, because Mother Nature isn't doing that job for us anymore. Not only is it not doing the seasonal job, but it's also not doing the species selection for us in the way it was before. So we have to use consciousness. Lisa, please just trust that and go, then do spring.
Okay, thank you.
Lori.
Hello, Lori.
Oh, you've got to unmute yourself, Lori, with the Zoom settings.
There we go. Good morning or afternoon, almost afternoon. So I had a question. If you were me, I have not been in a proper ketosis. I think I may have been in a few times for maybe a day or two, but since my challenge last fall, I've not been in ketosis for a length of time, and I'm currently in the Back to Spring program. But my question is Is a 6-week deep spring followed by 1 week in fall sound like a good plan for a ratio, or I'm looking to release about 15 more pounds?
Lori, I think that 6 weeks, look, there are people out there that tell you can live in spring, that you live in keto all the time. And I don't necessarily agree with that. And then the other thing is that what's more important to you is taking off the weight in the healthiest possible way or in the fastest possible way. And by the way, there's reasons for both. There are reasons for both of those to be good priorities, right? So what I would probably recommend to you, and by the way, how many pounds are you talking about? I think I saw in your comment here, like 15 or 20 or something.
Yeah, about 15. Most of it is below the waist, so you can't really see it on camera. But yeah, I lost about 18 last fall when I did the challenge. And I have since gained back between 3 to 5. I'm able to keep that. But sometimes I'm up 3 pounds, sometimes I'm up 5 pounds, and currently I'm up 5 pounds. So I'm at that threshold like you were talking about yourself. Yeah. So I'm looking to release another 15. And it seems to take me a while to get into ketosis. And I feel like I'll go a whole week eating in spring and I still don't feel like I'm in ketosis yet. And so I
Lori,
end up
I want you to know it does speed up. The more often you switch, the better the switch gets. So for me, I'm not in keto now, although it's even possible that I am. And I'll tell you why, because I just had a massive workout at the gym. I came straight home and all I ate was some meat and eggs for breakfast. It's all I've had. No, I'm not, because I started the morning with orange juice because I'm not in spring. So I started the morning with not orange juice, but oranges because my juicer was broken. So but the point is, so I'm not, but I know that I can be in by tomorrow if I want. Okay. And the reason is that I've done the cycle so many times that my body is familiar with the move. And so for some people, it takes them like 3 weeks. We've seen people on the WildFit challenge take 3 weeks to switch. Okay. It's taken them 3 weeks, but then the next time
I feel like it takes me a long time to get into ketosis. And then I'm like, oh my God. And now I got to stay in ketosis or spring for ever. But, do you think, I guess in my mind, my ratios, I was thinking like 5 to 6 weeks of deep spring to get and stay in ketosis. And then I was going to have a week of fall. But do you think a week of fall is too much?
I don't think so. But I want to try you a different way. I want you to see about doing something like this, like do 2 weeks in spring and then do a weekend in not like right out to fall. Like don't go all the way, but like allow some root vegetables, maybe some high antioxidant berries and stuff like that on the weekend. Then go back into spring. And then, so 2 weeks on, 2 days off. And then now go to this 6-1, 6-1, 6-1. So 6 days in spring and then 1 day where you have some berries or a little bit of root vegetables, say on Saturday or something. And just that 1 day. And go to 6-1, because what I want you to try to do is to train your body to flip in and out, flip in and out, flip in and out. Like, your body gets into keto. Oh, look, we just had some honey or we just had some berries. I got to process that. I probably come a little. And the other thing is, if you do use the keto strips, it'd be interesting for you to notice how quick that reaction is.
Yeah, I do use the keto strips. And lately, like I said, I know they're not super reliable, but lately I'm not getting anything. I've tested it with urine and I've tested it with water and they look the same. So I know I'm not getting anything from the strips. However, I just bought the Ketonics breath tester to see if that will work. So
let us know about that. I haven't tried one of those yet, but let us know in the Facebook group.
It's charging right now, so I'll try it tomorrow.
Good deal.
But I also have one quick question. When you said the carnivore spring, are eggs included in that?
Yes.
Okay, so eggs and meat.
Notice I didn't even let you finish. Eggs are like, I'm telling you right now, eggs are like one of the most perfect foods in the world.
Good, because I love them.
They are. And there's been all this negative campaigning against eggs. All that is the cereal companies going, shit, man, we lost too much plate real estate to the egg people. And they started campaigning against eggs and making us feel bad about them. I will say this, though, like anything, now I've said, oh, eggs are like, everybody's going to, Eric says eggs are perfect. We can have them every day. Nothing is good every day except for oxygen and water.
Right.
Your body needs a break from everything from time to time. But I'm a big fan of eggs. I just want to be really clear, not corn-fed chickens.
Right.
I'm talking
Okay.
about free range, insect hunting, seed eating, normal chickens out living their normal life, making those gorgeous orange yolks. You want that. Then you're talking, yeah, eggs are in.
What if you only eat egg whites?
Why would you do that? Like,
I
I don't. Oh, well, do you hate the yolk so much that you don't even like it scrambled?
I could tolerate it scrambled. I could do that.
Yeah, eat it scrambled. Just don't like give your body the. I mean, can you imagine one of your ancestors going, the yolk? I mean, that's your inner 12-year-old. Like, let that go and eat the damn thing properly.
Okay. So no, like literally just meat and eggs and that's it.
Meat, eggs, fish. Meat, eggs, fish. If you're gonna cook with fat, and you guys, I know this will sound counter, like sort of counter me, but if you're gonna cook with fat, then I'm gonna tell you, of course, there's some good oils out there, but any oil becomes a little bit not ideal once you're heating it and cooking it heavily. But if you're stuck, if any of you are in this world of like, I miss butter and I'm gonna try and use margarine, I'd rather use butter. And you know how I feel about dairy products. So like, I would rather that you use butter. And the truth of it is that for those of you who have lactose issues, ghee is actually quite a good solution for that, because all the lactose has been cooked out of it. And I'm not saying it's like healthy. I'm saying it's a less unhealthy way of dealing with it. But yeah, eggs, fish, meat. And then again, ideally anybody experimenting with sort of carnivore spring, it is, the expression they use is nose to tail. It effectively means that it means making sure that you also get the organ meats in and that sort of stuff, because our ancestors would never have given that to the dogs.
Gotcha. Okay, I'll try that. Thank you.
Good deal. Thanks, Lori.
All right, guys, I think we have time for one more, and then I know Eric has to stop. So, Johnny?
Hi, Eric. Nice to see you. So mine is a little bit of a technical question in terms of the carbs you were kind of talking about, the 25 grams. Practically speaking, like, how do you think you would figure out what 25 grams are? Like, do you look at the nutritional value of root, veg, and fruits and stuff, or how do you kind of figure it out for yourself?
Well, there's one really easy way to do it. Like, there's one really very easy, hang on. There's one really easy way to do it, is to just like, say you're eating carrots, 25 grams. Then you're not going to go over 25 grams of carbs, because it's not all carbs, right? Like, instead of getting all technical and going exactly how many, sugar particles and da 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 da. So, you might want to look at it from that perspective. It's just like, 25. I'm not going to eat more than 25 grams of that. How big is that? Right now, I mean, that's not scientific. It's just, but it's safe in the sense that if you only eat 25 grams of carrots, you can't possibly exceed 25 grams of carbs. Can't be done. But of course, you can look up the nutritional value of something, and they can give you a carb percentage. So if you look, like, here, let's just find out right now what. Okay, so carrots are, they're saying that carrots are about 10% carbs, which really means you could eat upwards of, say, 250 grams of them. So you can do the math that way as well. But again, I always want to err on the underside. So I tend to do that. I want to, if I'm going to be in spring, I typically stay fairly deep, and I wouldn't go, oh, well, look, there's 25, so I can eat 250 grams. I might go, well, I'm going to have half of that or something. So somewhere between that, I think you can find a method for yourself.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all again. And this recording will be up on the Facebook within 48 hours and emailed out to you. If you want to unmute, say bye, that'd be great.
Guys, I just want to say, before Kat hangs up on me here, I just want to say, I really really love the inquisitive nature of what you guys are doing and the questions. And I also love the team spirit that I see between you guys sharing strategies and sharing stuff with each other. And I'm absolutely committed to, you know, I've seen that there's like some feedback, like some people felt like spring this time wasn't the same because we didn't do Zoom calls and we did lives and that kind of stuff. And I'm looking at all of that stuff to try to provide the highest amount of value that we can for you guys. So I am listening. I'm out there paying attention. This is a long game we're playing. You know, this is a 10-year plan to have a massive impact on food regulation, food habits, and health around the world. And I see you guys as one of the really core components, you as in, and those of you who are live watching the recording, as a really core component of our battle in that sense, because you're committed and you're here and you're members of our community. So I just want you to know I am paying attention out there, and I'm really glad that you guys made the effort to be here today and came armed with interesting stuff. That's the best way to do it. Thank you guys all very much. See you next time around.
Thanks,
Thank
Eric.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, guys.
Thank you.